The next match that we've hit on is Danny Bull Johnson and Troy Montour, who are from Canada, against the USSR team. Of all the Canadian wrestlers that you could have picked, and Canadian wrestlers were, in the 80s, they had their own scene. They were big names from Canada working in the US. They picked two people that not only has no one ever heard of, they picked two people who, even now, they don't really seem to have existed.
Right. There's nothing online about them.
No.
Very little.
Honestly, Danny Johnson. Now, it's also made complex by the fact that Jim Ross and Paul Heyman, through the entire thing, they call the two Canadian wrestlers by the wrong names.
Right.
So Danny Johnson is the one who looks a bit like a cowboy. He looks like a sort of big blackjack mulligan. There's one page online about him, and it's the Canadian newspaper that talks about him. It mentions that he wrestled as Cowboy Danny Johnson, Bullwhip Johnson, Battleship Johnson, and he was son of the Bull Ron Johnson. Now, Ron Johnson is one of those names that just sounds like it's in fucking Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
But it also made me think of John Ronson. And John Ronson, the journalist from the UK, he actually, it reminded me again, he wrote a Guardian Weekend article about going backstage at the WWE in the wake of Chris Benoit's death. And it was a good article, but he was an outsider, and basically all of his stuff was sort of going up to Kane and going, so this Chris Benoit thing, eh? And Kane just going, oh, it's unspeakable tragedy.
Yeah.
And John Ronson going, oh, I thought he'd shout at me. Very John Ronson way of doing things.
What buttons are you pressing that I'm not pressing?
Mostly the blue and green ones.
Oh, okay, blue and green.
Yeah. You were in the WWF, right? So
Yeah.
you should be able to do
Empathize.
this.
I spent a few days inside the WWF.
Were you...
WWE.
Okay, hold on. First, so they work hard.
Yeah, they work hard.
Yeah.
And they're definitely, strong.
So Danny Johnson, that's all I could find out about him. The other guy, Troy Montour, he doesn't exist. He's the guy who is the indigenous Canadian. He's wearing his tribal headdress.
Right.
There is nothing about him online at all. I mean, literally zero. It's like he existed on this one night and no other. The only thing you can find out about him...
I hear is the Black Scorpion.
The only thing that is online about him is the fact that he took part in this Starrcade match.
Right.
There is nothing else. And it's just incredible that, I mean, to be a pro wrestler and to have no one's ever typed your name into the computer.
Well, you'd think that like a lot of kind of low to mid card wrestlers seem to administer their own Wikipedia pages. And that's very clear. You'd think that Troy would get involved. You deserve it. You're on a Starrcade, mate.
I was going to say, look, if he was still alive, it's amazing that he hasn't gone, I'm Troy Montour, Reddit AMA, about that. But the reality is, I can't find out whether he's alive or dead because there is no mention of him. Absolutely none. The commentators say they're not favoured here, and they're not favoured here because they're about to go up against two of the most frightening men ever seen in a pro wrestling ring since the match just before with the Steiner brothers. In the spirit of Glasnost, they pronounce Glasnost, please welcome to the United States of America, i.e. don't boo, representing the Soviet Union, VIKTOR ZANGIEV and Salman Hamishikov. These two guys come out. And the thing about these two guys is they don't really work as pro wrestlers because they have no culture of pro wrestling and they've basically been doing this for 2 years. What they are is unbelievable, frightening, amateur, real deal wrestlers. And the combination of those two worlds is too early to happen. Now, you see it all the time.
Yeah.
Even in the 90s, you'd see it all the time. At this point, it was just frightening because there were two men who were something else. They weren't pro wrestlers.
Yeah.
They were frightening, legitimate athletes, and they shouldn't have been in a ring with a cowboy and a man wearing a Native American headdress. It was such a culture clash. They come out, the two of them. Their heads look like they've been chewed. Their ears are just revolting. I mean, they're proper, just mashed up ears. Jim Ross says they represented the USSR in the Olympics. They didn't, but they are absolutely 100% the most legit things in the entire arena. Hashimikov, JR keeps saying Hamishnikov. Again, just like, it isn't that hard. I know I got it wrong just then, but I was glancing at the way that JR pronounced it. Hashimikov was a Chechen from Russia. He'd won 2 European and 4 World Championship gold medals in freestyle wrestling from 79 to 83. And VIKTOR ZANGIEV, he was a Russian of Ossetian origin, which sort of way back when he had Iranian heritage.
Right.
In 84, 1985, he won 2 of the biggest amateur wrestling titles, the US Soviet Cup Championships and the World Cup Championships. And in 88, Zangief won the Soviet Championship. Now, the thing about these two is amateur wrestling doesn't have a lot of money. And this is a really interesting point in history where the Soviet Union, under the spirit of glasnost, is beginning to open up. And one person who notices this in 89 is the New Japan promoter, Antonio Inoki. Inoki sort of realises that there's a big market that could possibly open for pro wrestling, which is Russia. So he invites to train in his dojo as professional wrestlers a load of Russian amateurs. So these two guys have had a handful of matches, pro matches, before they do this tag tournament. They come over doing exhibition matches against each other, and Hamishikov, he ends up winning the IWGP belt from Vader. The IWGP belt is the most important belt in Japan, and they put it on him. It's very much Antonio Inoki was always fascinated with legitimacy. And so he took part in early MMA. He had a match against Muhammad Ali. So seeing these Russian athletes, suddenly they were totally legitimate. He was like, I can bring them in, I can make them big, and then I can beat them, and I will be the biggest in the world. And then what happens is I can go to Russia and I will become like the world's most famous wrestler.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't quite happen in that way, but it's not a complete failure either. In December 1989, he and New Japan, his company, were able to run the world's first ever professional wrestling event in the USSR. It was at what was called at the time the Central Lenin Stadium. And it featured people like Jushin Liger, Riki Chosu, Hiroshi Hazi, Mr. Saito was on it. Inoki was obviously on there, Bam Bam Bigelow.
Nice.
And one British guy who was Rollerball Rocco in his Black Tiger gimmick. When I see Rocco popping up in things like that, I'm just like, I need to contact him to say, please sit down with me and we will write the book. It will be absolutely amazing. Now, the Russians did find it hard, really, to adapt to the showmanship of pro wrestling. They'd never seen anything like it before. They are amateurs who have worked their entire life in this one discipline. And I think what they found difficult was the performance part of it.
Yeah.
The legitimacy carried them so far, but they also had to have entertaining matches. And the entertainment was something that was so alien to people who have spent their lives. Essentially what their job is the constant and sustained assertion of leverage.
Yeah,
right?
and just finishing things as soon as possible.
Yeah, and you're suddenly like, well, you've also got to engage a crowd, and you're a bit like, but my job is to get, I push his shoulder down. That is it.
Yeah.
Zangief, he had less of an impressive career than Hashimikov, but
was he named after the Street Fighter 2 character, or was the Street Fighter 2 character named after him?
He became such a big cultural sensation in Japan that indeed he was the inspiration for the Zangief character.
Oh, interesting.
Akira Yasuda is the man behind Street Fighter 2. He had originally come up with a Russian character for it called Vodka Gabolski.
Oh dear.
But after seeing
VIKTOR
Zangief, the name was changed. And Zangief in Street Fighter 2, the whole moveset is centered on grappling. And he was the first ever fighting game character that was given a predominantly wrestling background.
Okay.
Interesting,
right. That's cool.
Yeah. And now, as a kid, I watched this match. I remember, seeing this when I was probably about 14, 15. And I thought, Zangief looked like a pensioner. He was bald. He's so disgustingly pelty.
I wrote hair ears. Yeah. That's all I've got for this match is the word hair ears.
He looks a bit like Borat. But watching it now, I was like, fuck me, he's a bit chilling. You get an impression that you are not going to be playing around if you were going to be in the ring with VIKTOR ZANGIEV. And as a kid, obviously, everyone looks the same age when they're old.
Yeah.
You would have no idea about the difference between a man who was 25 and a man who was 60. And I look at Zangief now and I go, he's one of those guys who from a distance looks old. When you get close up, you go, oh God, you're not old at all, are you?
He's got fire in his belly.
Dangerous. That's a dangerous position to be in. He does a suplex on Troy Montour, and Troy Montour has no idea what's happening. He lands straight on his face. Hamishikov comes in. They suddenly go, oh, here comes the powerhouse. And you can see the two of them going, what, the last one fucking wasn't. Chucking us on our heads. In comes Hamishikov. He does a belly-to-belly on Danny the Bull Johnson, or whatever his name is, and he pins him with a headlock. And everyone is like, what is going on? The crowd are sort of like, you don't pin off a headlock. The two guys are like, I'm not sure that's the ending that we agreed on. Troy Montour comes in and he sort of, when you're beaten, know when the match is over. These two guys have done their thing in their style. It's about them. And he comes over and he starts like padding at Salman Hamishikov like a big cat. He's like, naughty, get off. Get off.
That's not how you do it.
And then he does his sort of like indigenous Canadian war dance shuffle as well. And I did look at that and I did sort of think, this isn't the match to make that look dignified.
No.
You know?
No. You've just been beaten as well.
The two of them look as well. They look at him and they see that little war dance that he's doing. You see the two Russians just going, shall we subdue him?
Shall we subdue him?
Shall we end this with immediate and frightening speed? But I really enjoyed watching them. I mean, they were such a strange addition to an already strange card. But they are... what's really funny watching it now is their style. It certainly would fit in New Japan today. But I think at the time, we had seen nothing like that before. And I remember thinking, this is just alien and totally wrong. And you suddenly realise, nope, it wasn't wrong. They were the future.
Time,
They were just absolute pioneers.
Are you the guy that called?
Yes, I called. It is I, Shrimp. That is my name.
Hey, Shrimp, what's going on, man?
Sai.
I kind of knew it was fake.
Yeah.
But my son at the time, he was like 4,
Yeah.
didn't realise it was fake. So I had to pretend it was real. And then one of our favourite wrestlers, Chris Benoit,
What?
killed his wife and then himself.
Oh my God.
And then when my son read that in the paper, I had to pretend that was fake.
How do I look, yellow man?
The next match, here's a tag team match that's not in the tournament. I mean, it doesn't make any fucking sense. The Skyscrapers versus Big Cat and Motor City Madman.
Big Cats.
Two scrubs. They have never been on WCW before. It's such a weird thing. This is part of the Ole Anderson booking, where he begins going, you know what we bring in? We bring in established stars, like your Stan Hansens and your Tommy Riches, say. We'll bring them in and people, they have name recognition. And let's just fill up the rest of the card with cheap, no-name people. And that is what Motor City Madman and Big Cat are.
Well, the Motor City Madman, isn't that Ted Nugent? That's his nickname, isn't it?
I think it's a stolen thing. Motor City Madman, again, another person, if you try and find out anything about him, it really is 4 lines on the internet.
Yeah, and the rest is Ted Nugent.
It just seems... yeah, it's true. It just seems amazing to me that you can be on a wrestling pay-per-view and yet you've done nothing before or since. The
XFM breakfast show. The XFM breakfast.
That is true. Nobody ever paid for that, whereas this was a pay-per-view.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly.
People were willing to give money away for it. XFM, very, very different. Very different. It's only listened to by plumbers doing emergency calls. The Skyscrapers are the team who come in here, and the crowd are so excited for Sid Vicious's arrival. They want to see him turn. They want to see him become the Hulk Hogan of WCW. And he just looks the business. When he comes down, you go, that guy looks like an absolute cast iron star. And the match itself is just, I mean, it is what it is.
It's 1 minute.
It's a squash match on a pay-per-view, which is bizarre.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the actual narrative of the thing.
None at all. None at all.
Oh my! Oh! Double power bomb! 1, 2, 3! The Skyscrapers win it! Ladies and gentlemen.
But yeah, Motor City Madman. His Wikipedia is a single line, which just says that he did Starrcade 90. Just so bizarre. Again, if I met him in a bar and he was like 70 and he was a big bloke and he did a bit of the old pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Go, what did you do? He goes, Starrcade 90. Until I'd done this, I would have gone, he's fucking full of shit. I'd go, I remember Starrcade 90. He wasn't, I don't know who he is.
And you realise that there's just so many names and so many people.
Yeah, now I do this. I think, you know, if I was on a pro wrestler, my first question is, were you on Starrcade 90? And if they go yes, I go, are you Troy Montour? Are you a Motor City Madman? Or are you Danny the Bull Johnson?
Look, I mean, the same way that Stolen Valor and people are constantly outed for wearing medals that they didn't earn. Pete Donaldson, Starrcade, 1992.
Little advert for Wrestle War 91.
Right, Wrestle War 91. We have to do this at some point because all of
great.
the WCW pay-per-views sound utter proper mad.
I agree. I mean, this is being billed with Michael Hayes dressed as Uncle Sam, and Sting is there with I think called Bandolia's bullet sort of strap across him, and he just goes, dismissed, when the ad is over. And I just watched that and I went, this is everything I want from professional wrestling. And then we get the finals of the Pat O'Connor tag team tournament. The Steiners versus the Great Muta and Mr. Saito. We really didn't need the matches that built up to this, you know.
No.
This is actual wrestlers, and this is very much a part of New Japan and WCW begin to work together. And really one of the people who they know will slot into from WCW to New Japan are the Steiners. They are not just spectacular in the ring, but they're also legitimately stiff and hard. And I think the Japanese are salivating at the idea of having them over. They will have a really, really impressive massive early 90s Japanese career while working with WCW. And I believe they end up leaving the WWF because they want to go back to Japan, and Vince McMahon goes back on his word about allowing them to do so. Yeah. So what you've got here really is the first time they take on an all-Japanese team, and I presume it's also a sort of sense of Muta and Saito will return to New Japan with information about what they were like in the ring. I don't mean that in a kayfabe way. I think they'll be like, yeah, they're really good. Or, I don't mean them like sort of going, what you need to do when you face them.
Defeat them.
Yeah, they are very, very quick, but one of them is slow-witted. There is a huge reaction in the arena to this win. The Steiners are massively over. And then they go and get the trophy from Jim Herd, the executive, putting himself front and centre. He is seen as being one of the men who is responsible for the demise of WCW at this period. And he comes out and he does a thing saying, thank you very much to all of the teams who competed. And there's a strange bit where I think they must be talking about the military, but Scott says, my great-great-grand uncle, my two uncles fought in Korea
and Vietnam. And it's just like, right, okay.
Why did you start great-great-grat when you meant my two uncles?
We know when those wars were.
Me and my brother, we're very proud to represent the United States in the great wrestling town of St. Louis. But you know, there's other warriors that are representing the United States in Kuwait. My uncle, both my uncles fought in Korea and Vietnam, and I'm proud as hell for them, and I'm proud of these guys over in Kuwait.
And they had 66 and 2/3%. I got 141 and 2/3 chance of winning at sacrifice.
Hey, I got one thing to say. You
All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, congratulations, the Steiner brothers.